Hi, Wayne Doorband here for the bi-weekly NTP CEED webinar huddle that we hold here at our Northern Colorado headquarters in Loveland, Colorado, both live here at our site and also going out over the web to those of you that are watching. Enjoy what we have for you today.
Hey guys, thanks for joining this week. Our presentation is actually going to be a replay of an old webinar. Our presenter is going to be Amy Hutton. She resides in the Colorado Rockies, spreading sustainability and educating others with an impact that undoubtedly is affecting the human race and the world around us. She has a master's in agriculture and integrated resource management from Colorado State University and a BA in biology and environmental science from St. Olaf College. She's made a large impact in Aspen, Colorado, and the surrounding area. In this webinar, she gave us some pure gold nuggets about how to run a sustainable farm, and we decided that it's just too good not to pass on. So thanks everyone for joining. We're going to get started here. Grab some popcorn, sit back, and enjoy. Feel free to ask any questions in the chat box or save them to the end. And we'll give them some extra attention at the end. Enjoy.
Hey there. How are you guys? Thanks so much for the
Is that playing a video?
And thank you everyone for joining in. I just started working at Rock Bottom Ranch last, and before that I had just finished a graduate program at CEED in Integrated Resource Management. So I got really lucky and found a job right up my alley. So this is me, just so you know who you're talking to. And I'm here with one of my favorite pigs, Laura Jean, and her second litter, a few kids all up and down the valley for over 30 years. So they have a really strong presence here and do some wonderful things for the community. And they bought this property, which is 117 acres, down right along the Roaring Fork River, just south of Aspen. Not south, down valley, I apologize. But they bought that in 1999 and have been using it to teach a lot of kids about farming and about wetlands restoration and about just how to deal with animals and be outside. So we see a little over 15,000 kids a year. Our educators do amazing things. But I am extremely lucky in that I just get to play with the animals all day. And I don't have to deal too much with those crazy kids. So my job has been to develop our livestock programs so that not only we're actually producing meat and eggs, but also we're able to demonstrate that to other producers or even just folks with a backyard or a couple acres who would like to take these ideas home and create some of their own food. So my favorite animals at the ranch are the pigs. And we have a really unique breed of pigs out there. They're called the large black hog, which is admittedly a pretty terrible name, but they're a heritage breed that was developed in England, and one of their most fantastic features is that they're able to consume and metabolize a really large amount of grass and turn that into this delicious micro-marbled meat that is different than any pork you've ever had. So they're incredibly sustainable. We don't have to feed them a bunch of corn and soy that we ship in from long distances. We're able to have them use the land and actually improve the land by rotating their grazing and having them follow the chickens and doing other exciting things like that. So this is one of our other sows, Sammy, and she is actually just a year old and she's already 500 pounds. So these are big pigs. They live up to that large black thing. And her litter this year was 7 piglets. And this is some piglets out eating our field that we planted for them with turnips and ryegrass and also some mangels. And we do that and use the pigs to rototill. And they just rip all the weeds out of the soil for us. And then this, what you see here is a growing field next year for we're hoping to develop kind of a small CSA.
So Amy, you're not getting them into a field that you're using and then having to stop them from eating crops. You just kind of set them out in fields that you're not using, or are you using them in crop fields as well?
Well, we do a little of both. Right now, we're not raising all that many crops. We're just doing pretty small-scale things.
Okay.
But we'll put them into the garden areas and just fence them off with electric fencing in the areas that need to be ripped up. And then they'll, fertilize the soil and really get it nice and loamy and full of organic matter. And then we can move them on and plant that. And then they're also out in our pastures. So it's a little bit of both.
Okay.
But Amy, in some areas you have planted crops specifically for these pigs to eat. Like you mentioned the turnips and the mango beets, correct?
Yeah, exactly. We're trying as much as possible to produce our own feed on site. There's a really fantastic book called Kick the Hay Habit. It's one of my favorites. And one of the most wonderful ways that we can become more sustainable is by not shipping in our livestock feed and not getting hay from, the western slope, and then grain from Montana is where a lot of it's been coming from for farmers around here. Instead of that, we can just grow a lot of it on site since we have the space, and we're lucky enough to be right by the river, so we can irrigate and sub-irrigate and get some good production. So we try to recycle as much as we can in that way. So this is our boar, Big Willie. He's one of my favorites. He's really sweet, though he looks kind of vicious. We have to be pretty careful. We have all these kids on site all the time. So we have to be really careful in how we select the animals that we're going to raise. They can't just be productive. They also have to be really good with kids. And so these are just the perfect hog breed, and I couldn't recommend them highly enough. These are our sows again, the two older ones, and then we'll be retaining some of their piglets so that our herd will be growing every year. And this is the 2012 litters. So.
When these piglets come into the world, how much do they weigh?
They are born between 2.5 and 3.5 pounds. There's a really drastic difference between the big ones and the runts in the litter, and it's pretty aggressively competitive amongst siblings. But we were lucky enough not to lose any to aggression this year. We've had problems with that in the past. But we had 7 in each litter, which was pretty typical for first-year sows. This was both of their first litters, so we were really excited. And we got a good mixture of boys and girls. And these are our hutches that we raise, and then it's so simple. And anyone with a little bit of property and some electric fencing could easily do this. These hutches, the sows just understand to go in when they need shelter, and they're out when they don't need shelter, and they're really a very self-sufficient kind of pig. Most pigs are raised in confinement and are very carefully separated from each other and from their babies, but ours really have great instincts, and I was so excited to see. I didn't take any of the typical precautions this year by separating them out and being really careful that the 2 litters of piglets didn't intermingle, and they lived up to my highest expectations. So it really says a lot for heritage breeds.
Amy, could you speak up just a little bit? We had someone raise their hand that they're having a little trouble hearing you.
Yeah, sure. Sorry about that.
Oh, no problem. No problem. So you now you've mentioned that this breed of pig is generally more docile because you've got the kids around. I mean, that, like you said, that boar looked pretty scary. So they're known for being okay around people.
Yeah, they are. It's one of the most wonderful attributes about them. And they were actually the most popular breed of pig in the UK for almost a century before confinement hog rearing became popular. They just won't live in confinement, but they're totally wonderful in a normal situation where they get to be a pig and be outside in the mud. And they're extremely docile. They love being scratched, and they're also very adorable. They don't have any stench, which is pretty fun to show all of our visitors who are expecting disgusting pigs. They're quite clean animals, and so they're just wonderful for education. Also, they're extremely easy to keep behind a fence. This is all we have to do. It's a single line of electric fencing. That top line is just for humans because we have a lot of people who want to go in and grab the piglets. So we We really only need that one lower line, and that's all it takes. It's pretty nice.
Wow. Wow.
Yeah. Amy, you used a term a few minutes ago that I'd love for you to clarify for our audience. You talked about heritage breeds. Could you tell me just a little bit more about that?
I would love to. I am so excited about some of our heritage breeds. These are animals that have been selected over oftentimes centuries to be really well adapted to a very particular environment. So, for example, with these large black hogs, they do wonderfully outside. They're extremely cold tolerant, and yet they do very well in the heat. And they're good at foraging for their own meals. They can take care of their own babies and protect them from predators. And that's the case with a lot of heritage livestock breeds, which unfortunately we're really rapidly losing. And I know it's the same, of course, with crops and with things like tomatoes. And it's just essential that we keep these wonderful genetics around so that if it comes a time when we can no longer produce hogs in confinement, we have animals that will really thrive out here. And there's actually only 800 of these large black hogs in America currently. They're listed as endangered. So I'm really excited to be taking a part in developing the breed and selecting the very best and expanding them. It's really wonderful. We do a lot of our own on-site butchering because I learned very quickly in my first year that taking animals down to the slaughterhouse is a very long and treacherous drive, and it's just not really as humane. It's really stressful for them. It's very expensive for the farmer because the fees for butchering are almost, in our case, the same as the cost of producing the animal. So it completely cut into our profits to the point where we were losing money. It also, you know, the time spent in the car, the gas wasted, and so we've started doing most of our own on-site butchering and having customers buy the animal live and then pay us a butchering fee, and that way we can get around the USDA regulations that favor very large farm businesses. This is our butcher doing a class and preparing one of our hogs, getting some good bacon and lard out of there.
So you do butcher, and so almost you do ag education from like a commercial sense where so like a farmer could actually learn a new skill, and so you don't only teach to kids down there?
Yeah, actually, since I've been here, I've been really trying to develop our adult education. Rock Bottom Ranch has been primarily for kids and almost had a little bit of a petting zoo flavor to it, so we've been really trying to update that and provide something that would be a lot more useful to the community. And there's been a huge call and a lot of response on all of these home butchering, home chicken rearing, all the gardening classes. People in town are just very excited to start doing this on their own and also to free themselves from the system of industrial animal production. So it's been wonderful, and we've been producing a lot of meat. So we also do a lot of chickens, both for eggs and meat. So these are just some of our cute chicks. I thought I'd better throw in some cute photos. And this was one of my experiments this year. I had read that you can train the chicks to weed by starting them off on your most hated weeds really early. So I'm sure Ariel will recognize that one. Her spine might even recognize that one. And so far the chickens have been eating bindweed. They don't seem to be like voraciously preferring it, but I think the experiment kind of works. So I'll definitely continue feeding my chicks a little bit of bindweed in the future.
So Amy, expand on that a little bit. So you're as they're growing, you're feeding them the weeds from out in your fields that you want them to eat when they get older, and they kind of will eat. I mean, that's a really interesting theory.
Yeah, you're supposed to start them on day one, and you just chop it up pretty small and start getting them used to liking it. And it is some pretty good nutrition for them as well, so it's kind of a win-win. And I know it works especially well with certain breeds of ducks, which I haven't had a chance to experiment with yet. And it doesn't work quite as well with chickens because chickens are just contrary animals, and they'll never do quite what you want. But we had pretty good luck with this. You can also do this with pretty much any livestock. There's some really great ways to train animals, both when they're young and even if you get them as adults, not only to not eat certain things, but to prefer other things. It's a pretty neat way to condition them by just, if you put in something that upsets their stomach along with a dangerous weed or a desirable crop, you can pretty quickly train them not to eat it. So animals can be very well integrated into a growing production without doing a lot of damage.
That's amazing. I really think that you've done this is fantastic. I love the idea of anything tackling bindweed, any animal other than me taking care of it. It's perfect.
Exactly. And then these are some of our grown chickens out there enjoying their pasture. They love a fresh pile of dirt, of course, so they're enjoying where I was just digging up to fix the well. And this is our pastured poultry. I'm really proud to say that as of about 2 weeks ago, we have all of our chickens out on pasture, and they're in a system that I rotate them to a fresh area every week. And before they go onto the area, I have the goats go in and mow it down because the chickens won't eat the forage plants if they're above like 2 inches high. They only like that really fresh, high-protein growth. So I have the goats go in there and mow it down, and the goats also leave a lot of manure, which the chickens will very happily 6 days later pick all those maggots out of. So we've got a great little system going. Because it's been so hot, I mowed the grass in rows in this particular paddock just so they'd have a little shade, and that also provides them with a good little bank of grasshoppers and other bugs. So they've been having a blast.
So Amy, I have a quick question. You said that the chickens are scratching through the goat droppings for bugs and such. How is it that they don't get sick from doing something like that?
Well, luckily, with most of our species, the parasites that affect the goat won't bother the chicken or the pig, and same with the cow. So we're just lucky enough to have different enough species that we can pull that off. The pigs will actually also consume the goat manure, which might sound a little creepy, but the pig's digestive tract is so acidic that they can actually glean more nutrients out of the goat's. It's kind of like a steamed spinach salad for the pigs, I guess you might think of it. And so we've tried different variations on having animals follow animals, and my favorite one, but one which got a little complicated, was the cows and the goats together, followed by the pigs, followed by the chickens, and we were able to eliminate a lot of parasites that way, and then you don't need to use all of the chemical drugs like Ilomac to deworm your animals, and that makes a drastic impact on pasture production, actually. Having that, just not having that poison in the soil, it increases grass growth as well as diversity by quite a noticeable amount. Is this loud enough now, by the way?
I'm hearing you.
I'm hearing you okay. Okay.
Amy, this is Wayne. Real quick, you're actually coming in really good now. I just wanted to mention to our audience, because we didn't say this at the front end, if you guys have any questions at all, this is intended to be interactive, and we'll ask them to Amy while she's going along, and then at the end we'll actually have some of you be able to be live. But you should see on your little bar on the right side of your screen the ability to type in questions. So if you go to that little section where it says questions, you can type in a question, and I actually see that we're getting a couple of them now, but I wanted to mention that that was available. So since we're on that topic, Candace just asked a question, Amy. How long are you able to keep the animals on the pasture before you rotate? She didn't say specifically which of your types, but let's just leave it wide open. You can answer that.
Sure thing. Well, there are a million different methods for rotating on pasture. The The most popular one these days, I would say, is called mob grazing. And generally, that's where you have a very high density of animals. So you might have 50 head of cattle on 1 acre. And they'll be on that 1 acre for 24 hours, and then they're moved again. And that is ideal. That's just wonderful for the ground, because that is how, you know, the native grazers in this part of the world used to use the rangeland. They would be very tightly grouped due to predator pressure, and they would move frequently, and they would not be on the same area of land at the same time of year. So we get as close to that ideal as possible. Since I just have lots of different things to do, I don't move my fences once a day. I generally move once a week and have a little lower density with my stocking rates, and that's worked pretty well for us. We're also lucky to have very resilient pasture species. We've got a lot of brome out here and a lot of really well-established white clovers. So I'm able to hit those a little bit harder, but a really essential part of figuring out how to graze your land is monitoring. And you do that by doing things like line transects to find out how much bare ground you have, exactly what species and in what density of plants you have. And then you can figure out how they fare after you graze on them, and how they fare not only right after they've been grazed, but after they've been given a recovery time, and how often is best to regraze them. So it's very dependent on what part of the country you're in, what kind of a drought you're in, for example. That makes a big difference. And also what kind of animals you have. You know, horses are notoriously a little bit harder on pasture than like cows and goats and sheep and hogs. So you just have to be a little bit more careful and often create a sacrifice area where that animal can be for a long period of time, so you can take good care of most of your pastures. Sorry if that got a little long.
Amy, what brand of oh, that's fine. That's a great answer. What brand of portable netting fencing are you using here? We actually do everything you've been describing here at our ranch in northern Colorado, and we've been doing it for 5 years. And I'll answer the question that was raised from our perspective, because we're a commercial farm. We have to make money.
Oh, okay. Well, I have been using Premier generally, though honestly I've used some stuff that I just found lying in sheds and scrapped it all together. My favorite fence charger is, I think I have a picture of it. Oh no, maybe I don't. Yeah, my favorite fence charger is this really compact little guy that puts out 8,000 volts, and at the moment I can't remember the brand name of it, but it was an awesome deal. It's not Pioneer. But anyway, I can get that name to you if you're interested, and that's the one with the least trouble with shorting. But it's just been trial and error. I haven't been crazy about the twine. I prefer the tape or the Intella rope. And I like the poultry netting, but it definitely needs a lot of work. So.
Have you had any problems yet with predation from birds during the day on your chickens or turkeys, hawks, eagles, and the like?
You know, it hasn't been hawks and eagles. It has been the magpies. They will go in and just start. I assume they'll pick out a bird that looks a little weak, and they'll just start pecking. It's pretty horrifying. So I've been. It's always adapting with farming, of course. And so I've been trying to develop different shade structures that the chickens seem to enjoy staying under, and we haven't had huge amounts of problems. You know, I also got a 22, and I've been getting a lot of practice.
Are your chickens and turkeys going into some kind of a protective structure at night, or are they out in the temporary pastures 24 hours a day?
Well, with our meat birds, we had these very simple chicken tractors that we would close them into at night. And that did the trick for coons and owls. We still had a heck of a problem with weasels, which we're still having. But with the laying hens, since they kind of escort themselves in at night, I've just given them a shelter, and we don't lock them in. I just keep that electric fencing as hot as I can get it and make sure there are no gaps. And so far, so good. You never know, but it's been working decently well.
Thank you. Keep going.
Yeah. All right. Let's see. This is our first experiment. Last summer, we raised 1,600 meat birds. It was insane to go that big that fast, but that's just what we ended up doing. So we got to experiment with 4 different breeds. Another plug for heritage breeds, sorry. But this is our first batch of 500. These guys are the typical broilers you'll buy in the grocery store, Cornish rocks, and you can just look at them. They're little monsters. They don't have all their feathers grown in. Their breasts are insanely huge, and they just had no survival skills. So we were really unimpressed. We had very high mortality just from these guys like falling into a shallow dish of water. It was insane. So after that, we tried the Freedom Rangers, and then we also tried 2 breeds developed by a geneticist down in Montrose, Colorado. His name is Tom Whiting. He's awesome. And I ended up loving this bird right here. This is his intermediate. It's a cross of a couple different heritage breeds, including the Belle Rouge, which is a very popular French meat chicken. And this bird just did great. They're very hardy. They do well at altitude, and they're just a lot smarter about not getting their heads stuck in the fence and killing themselves and things like that. They did great, and they actually do a good job foraging. So I would highly recommend them. We ended up deciding after our 1,600 meat birds that taking them down to the processing plant was completely not feasible. We're lucky enough to have a very strong Latino population here in the valley, and we, in the end, just started selling our meat birds live to them, and it was wonderful. We ended up meeting a lot of new people that would have otherwise not come to our ranch, and we made a much better profit and didn't have to deal with the messy process of processing a chicken, which is pretty gross, frankly. And then we also have both meat and dairy goats. Because of the complications with dairy and very strict regulations, I know all of you guys have heard about the raw milk chaos that's going on. We have not been expanding our dairy program. I've been concentrating on our meat goat program with some boar goats. This is our family of boar goats, Luann and her triplets. They are wonderful and easy. You just put them out on pasture, and then you harvest the kids at 4 to 6 months old, and you're done. So there's no twice daily milking, and they're easy, wonderful, hardy animals. So I've been really enjoying the goats, and of course they're really adaptable. We can throw them into any of our other grazing systems, and they do just great. This is our dairy goat. She is completely wonderful and has really delicious milk, even though we can't currently sell it. So those are her 2 kids from this year, and that's one of our little girls we'll be saving. So we're excited about her potential. She's got some really good genetics. And then in my opinion, second most exciting project, just after pigs, which are unbeatable, are these rabbits. And my coworker Peter has been really heading this up. He's really excited to get our meat rabbit program going. And we have right now probably 60 rabbits on the property growing up, getting ready to be harvested. And we'll be selling to local restaurants as well as just folks who stop by. Rabbits are fantastic. They're extremely clean. They eat nothing but grass, so they're essentially free to us. We just move them around in these little tractors. We move them about 3 times a day, give them a little fresh water, and in 8 weeks you have the most incredible meal you've ever had. They're fantastic. And if you wait 4 months, then you have a bonus pelt. So they're dual purpose, and I just can't believe how sustainable they've turned out to be. They really are.
Amy, Hey, Amy, we had a question from Mary Andley, one of our esteemed panelists and partners in this venture, and Mary was wondering how do you feed in the winter?
Oh, that's a good question. Well, let's see, it depends on which animal, I guess. With pretty much all of them, we've been doing hay, and I've been developing our hay production on the back pasture. And I'm also trying to stockpile forage for the winter, where you keep it out on the field and let the animal collect it itself, which saves a whole lot of fuel and time. So it's been quite a process. Our pastures have not been maintained for ag production. They've just kind of been left to go wild, which in a way is wonderful, but because we don't have a natural population of grazers here, we certainly don't have any bison, and the elk who are here do not behave normally because they don't have predators, and there's a crazy amount of them. So our pastures have gotten in a pretty nasty condition. So I've been working to redig the ditches and fix our water system so we can actually do some irrigation. We're just doing flood irrigation here, which sounds very wasteful, but it turns out it's actually really sustainable if you're in a low area, just since right back into the groundwater. So that's been a good system, but you've got to make sure you've got good drainage, and so we've been trying to replace our pasture species with some better and more native species. We've got a lot of weeds back there. So anyway, it's a long process, but I'm working towards producing all of our own hay, and we've got some burrows on the property and some antique hay equipment, and I actually, with the help of a friend, fixed up our old antique hay rake, and we've been using that, which has been a lot of fun. So, you know, that's part of the demonstrational educational part. Obviously, it's not going to be particularly profitable, but we're having a good time, and we're hoping to produce more of our own hay. And then for the goats and hogs, they obviously need a little more than hay, though the hogs will eat a surprising amount. So I am trying to grow some grains here. I'm focusing on sunflower seeds because they do so darn well, and they're a great source of nutrition for hogs, chickens, pigs, everyone. And I'm using the old, really manure-filled paddocks and putting in some heavy feeders like squash and sunflower, and we're doing some Three Sisters planting with some bean, squash, and sunflower, and so I'm hoping to be able to use that for winter forage as well. And we had good luck with turnips and mangoes last year. Let's see, this is one of our mama bunnies with her new litter of babies. They're terrible mothers. They don't take care of their babies at all, but they are really adorable. And
Amy, on your rabbits, on the rabbits, do you know whether their parasites are similar? Do they have similar parasite problems as your goats might have, or other species in terms of how they might impact them in the pasture?
You know, from what I've read, rabbit parasites really only affect rabbits, and I'm not sure why the parasites are that specific. That is a really good question. But we have not had any trouble. We do regular fecals, take them into the vet just to make sure. Since I am doing a more holistic approach, I want to make sure I'm not screwing up and getting all of our animals sick. And we have had good luck so far. In general, though, we are keeping the rabbits on lawns around the building instead of putting them out in the pasture with the other animals, and that's purely for educational convenience. So it also protects them a little from predators, but we haven't had a ton of interface between the rabbits and other livestock. But that's definitely a good concern to wonder about.
You're probably going to get there, but have you been harvesting your rabbits yet? And if so, again, how are you butchering those, or are you selling those live, or how are you dealing with that?
Well, so far we have only butchered 3 litters, I think, and we butchered them here on site, and we ended up just using them for barter. So we didn't sell any of them, so we didn't have to worry about the logistics of having people buy the rabbit and then pay the fee and all that. We just, would trade it for whatever, wine, mowing, whatever we needed. They're great in that way. Everyone wants a rabbit. And, yeah, we butcher them here. It takes even someone who hasn't done many rabbits like myself, I can probably do one in under 10 minutes, and there's no odor. They're so clean, and it's very humane. So I am very impressed. After having done a couple hundred chickens, I'm just kind of done with poultry because they're really gross, but the rabbits are fantastic, and they have gorgeous hides.
And how about rabbit meat? How does it taste for those who have not had it, and what do you think of it?
I have heard that wild rabbit meat is very dark and gamey. Our rabbits, since we harvest them so young, have a very light, tender meat, and it is similar in texture to chicken, but it doesn't have that stinky chicken flavor. It has just a really nice, clean bite, and it's my favorite meat. As much as I love the pork, a rabbit done right is incredible, and it's also extremely healthy, and I think everyone knows about that, but the rabbits are really good eating, and so it's wonderful.
You might have said this, but what breed do you have, and why did you choose the breeds or the breed or breeds that you have?
Yeah, I actually forgot to mention that. Thanks. We currently are experimenting with Californians and New Zealand's, and our reasoning for choosing those two, they are both of them are really good dual-purpose breeds, but most of it was just because that's what we were able to get around here. We found some through 4-H projects, so we're just trying to keep the genetics diverse, and we like them both. It's very individual to the rabbit more than the breed we found. We have some Californians who produce huge litters of big babies, and some who are just, kind of duds. And so we're just experimenting. But right now we have a really wonderful New Zealand buck. We're really excited about him. His name is Professor Peanut. You can tell we have lots of kids around naming all of our animals. And he's been producing some really nice, fast-growing babies. So we're very excited. We also actually have a couple mutt rabbits that have a little bit of wild genetics in them. And they produce really large litters. I'm not sure. They're very small rabbits, but produce very large babies with the right sire. So it's kind of an experiment, but we're ironing out the kinks and starting to get some more consistent quality and size.
Tim has asked, this is backtracking a little bit, but Tim has asked, how do you kill your chickens? How are you killing them for butchering? And I know you've said that killing them has been just an issue in terms of the problems with it, and that's why you're trading them live now. But when you did kill them, how did you kill them?
Yeah, well, luckily we took most of them to the slaughter facility, so I was not doing all 1,600 myself. But for the couple hundred we have done here, and I think I know what Tim is alluding to, I've tried a few different methods of slaughtering, and everyone has their preferred method, and mine is just, my goal is to be the most humane for the chicken, so mine's not the most tidy, but after experimenting with various methods, decided upon the broom method, as I call it, which involves a broom handle, and you simply break the bird's neck with the broom handle, and then it's unconscious and brain dead. So from there on, when you cut its throat, it's not feeling anything. Most people kill chickens, well, not most, I should say most professional facilities kill chickens simply by slitting arteries. They bleed out better if you don't break the neck until after you slit the arteries, but then they are conscious. So I do not like that. And yeah, so we do all of our chickens here on site. We don't have an automatic plucker. We don't have a particularly good facility, and I think those things are really essential. And if we ever end up doing a lot more chickens, I'll get a much nicer facility, a little bit of stainless steel, maybe some knives that aren't horribly dull. We'll see. So, but yeah, the broom method actually I got from the Stories Guide. So if you're ever needing to kill a chicken, check out the Stories Guide. They'll walk you through it, and it's hard. You cannot actually mess it up, which is wonderful, because you really can with the other method.
Awesome. We'll let you keep going.
Yeah, and this is one of our piglets this week. They're getting to that age where not only do they escape all the time, and I no longer like them very much, but they're also famished. They will eat until they'll just eat all day. So this is one of my favorite piglets. His name is Lefty because he has a funny ear, and he is tasting my shoe. And I just wanted to talk a little bit about what we're feeding our animals because it's really unique, and I'm pretty excited about it. When I first got here, we were just feeding them commercially produced grain. It was organic, but it was shipped from a long way away. And the way that they make grain digestible to livestock is they crush it, and then they steam it, and then they grind it. And as you can imagine, that takes a lot of the nutrients out of it. And it also creates a dry powder that isn't fantastically digestible, and there's a good deal of waste. So it took me a good 9 months to figure out a better system. We were trying to buy it in bulk and all sorts of different complications, of course. But eventually, I started reading a lot about sprouting. And sprouting, as I'm sure most of you know, is a way to get a lot more nutrition available out of that same little grain. So I started experimenting, sprouting on trays and sprouting in buckets and all sorts of different things, and finally came upon this bucket system that I have a picture of here. And I'm able to sprout all of the feed for our livestock, and because of that, I can triple the available nutrition in that feed, so we're able to save a lot of money, as long as you don't count, my labor, which gets a little intensive, of course. But so this is my system, and you can see the 4 white buckets on the floor on the right. That's where I soak the grains for 12 to 24 hours to get germination started. And you can see a little space heater in there next to them. That's just for cold nights. If the grains get under 45 degrees, they don't germinate so well, I discovered. And then I pour them into the top row of buckets, and that water rinses through all 3 layers, so I'm able to recycle water and use a little bit less. And then I just move them down a rack every day, and by the 3rd day, they're really nicely sprouted, and they're ready to feed the animals. They all love them, so that's been wonderful. And for animals that we have to have out not on pasture for some reason, like the very small chicks who aren't ready to go out, or if we have a goat about to give birth and she needs to be indoors, I'll green sprout some of those and just put them in a tray for another couple of days, and then they can get that chlorophyll and those extra nutrients as well. So we're able to get organic feed in bulk delivered and then use a whole lot less of it. So just wonderful. It's, of course there are some kinks. I've had to figure out the right temperature so we don't get mold, which can be very dangerous to goats. Luckily, chickens have iron stomachs, so if I get moldy feed, it's just chicken food. But yeah, and then we use the wastewater to water our fruit trees. So it's been pretty exciting for me, and so I'm excited to keep expanding it.
Amy, has Ariel told you at all about what we're doing with fodder? Are you aware of that at all?
She might have, but remind me what you guys are doing.
Well, a lot, and we'll go into that later. But so it's going to lead to a couple of my questions here, and so I wanted to say that we have fodder experience, actually a lot of it. Wonderful. But I will.
Hello?
Are you there?
Oh, did we lose Wayne?
I think we might have lost Wayne.
Oh. Well, Ariel, do you know where?
You did lose me. You did lose me for a second. So I'm going to be real open and tell you why. My dog Sky, who is a 9-year-old golden retriever who acts like he's 3 weeks old at times, has been laying next to me here, and he does most of the time when I'm at home. And he brought me a ball just a few minutes ago, and so I've been putting it in and out of his mouth. And while I was doing that, he stood on my on and off switch on my mic, so that's why it went off for a little bit here. And I had no idea that had happened because he was sitting there playing with this ball, and I was trying to talk and multitask. So I'm not sure where you lost me, but I said I was going to be a little bit of a cynic and ask you a couple questions about this. And it's because we get asked this a lot, and quite honestly, you probably somewhat answered it. But why do you think that those sprouts, that 3-day of growth, and you didn't say what kind of grain, so that's another question I'll ask you. What kinds of grains are you using? But why do you think that has more nutrition when, quite honestly, you can think about it scientifically, and honestly, it actually should have less? Other than for the things you described in terms of processing, if you were to feed straight grain, barley, wheat, oats, and the animals were to eat it, would that grain fed straight, without the crushing, other things you described, would it have more or less nutrients than the sprouts that you are producing in 3 days?
Okay, well, I'm definitely not a feed scientist, so this answer may not be overly technical. But from my understanding, the whole grain would indeed have more energy within it and more intact nutrients. You're going to lose some of that through the sprouting and the rinsing and the soaking and all that. But that nutrition won't be available to the animal, especially with our ruminants. They're not particularly set up to break down grain. So by sprouting the grain into a mini plant, it becomes something that the microbes in their rumen are more able to break down. That's sort of what I understand.
And I'd just like to add something. Oh, sorry, go ahead.
Go ahead, Ariel.
Okay.
Well, I was just going to go ahead.
Okay. I also wanted to add just quickly that there's enzymatic action that goes on within the seed as it's germinating that changes the structure of certain carbohydrates and proteins that makes it more available to whatever animal is eating it.
Wonderful. Thank you, Ariel. That is the science that I needed behind that.
By the way, both of your answers were excellent and awesome, and I'm going to say it from my heart, preach it to us, ladies. There are nutritionists who would argue very strongly against both of your answers. And I'm talking about PhD nutritionists. Matter of fact, a lot of the livestock nutritionists at major universities would probably mount some strong arguments. But I would say that those arguments come because they really don't want to see or learn anything different. Instead, they many times represent feed companies themselves. Bottom line is that it's something that they've been taught. They don't really know necessarily, even though they might be PhD nutritionists, professors and such. But I think your answers are excellent, and I think they're accurate. And by the way, I do have considerable nutritional knowledge and have some letters behind my name that would indicate that. But the reality is those are great answers, and it's something we really need to be teaching. And Jason, aren't you sort of chuckling as these two women are telling us something that we've been teaching, and interestingly, something we think is going to be huge in the whole world of livestock nutrition moving ahead. So.
Wayne, I've actually been kind of chuckling the whole time for two reasons. Both because this is phenomenal to see the sprout system that she has, and also that I kind of made a mistake when I made the marketing for this. I thought we were going to have an overview on a ranch, and basically we've got a lesson in rotational grazing and alternative feed and ranching methods, and it's just been a wonderful hour. I do want to mention to everybody, we always like to be cognizant of the hour. We are coming up on an hour. We will run over. We've got a lot more questions, but I do want to make everyone aware that we are coming up onto about an hour for some of you that have tight schedules. So.
Yeah, and I'm going to say when we get up on our hour here, we'll sort of do a little bit of a summary, and we will go a little bit longer unless Amy's got to get off here. But Amy, staying on your fodder system for just a second, or your sprouting system, when you're putting the water in from the top, as we can see in the picture here, that first time, are you throughout the rest of the 3-day cycle? Are you watering any more, or are you just doing that one time and letting the water drip down and through? And then how much, and then the second question, how much are you putting in each of those containers? A pound of grain, and they look like 5-gallon containers, maybe smaller actually. They might be a little bit smaller than a 5-gallon container.
Yeah, actually you're right. They're a little smaller. This is a completely recycled system here. Those are icing buckets from our local bakery. So I think they're around 3 gallons, and I fill them about 2/3 full and then 3/4 full with water. And that expands right to the top of the bucket by the end. And so I pour in the first bucket so they'll get watered by a fresh batch of buckets once a day. And then I also go in and give them a quick hose down, either in the morning or evening, depending. So they're getting a quick rinse twice a day. And I found that does make a big difference with the mold. And I've got these funny-looking little skirts on the buckets with duct tape. And that way I have holes drilled most of the way up the bucket so it aerates a little better. And that's been working a little better too. It's not perfect yet, but we're getting there. So,
Amy, I have another quick question too. Have you tried trays at all, or have you just experimented with these buckets?
Yeah, I have done trays. And I've had really good luck doing green sprouts with the trays, where I take sprouts that have been rinsed in the buckets for 3 days and then put them in the trays. But I found that leaving them just in the trays, with the trays I have, obviously, I don't have, trays that drain very well, so that would probably make a difference. But they tended to get rancid with the system I was using. And also, I feel like I can do a lot more volume by not spreading it out. The first time I did this, I tried it on shelves. And I just couldn't get enough volume for how much work that was taking, and they were drying out a little too fast. But that's just my system. So I know that most systems, I believe, use trays. So.
Amy, did you say yet what kinds of grains you're using? What kinds of grains are you using in the system?
No, I didn't. I developed this on not only a nutritional basis, but also very much on what was available that I could get locally without having to get it shipped a long way, and what I could find in organic that was within a reasonable price zone, and non-GMO. So I am doing Milo, which I was able to find in Colorado, and oats, which I was able to find in this valley, which is fantastic. And the pigs and chickens get some corn, which seems to add a little more energy to their mix. And then the goats get some locally grown sunflower. And then they all get some barley as well. And I think that's all the ones that I'm using for now. I've tried some different ones, but those are the ones that I've kind of settled on for this year.
Is your system a little bigger than what we're seeing here? It looks like the trays might go on further than what the picture shows, or is this the extent of it?
It's 2 buckets a day for our laying hens and chickens, and it's 1 bucket a day for pigs and 1 for goats. It's not a lot, but because these grains average out to 11% protein, and my milking does and pregnant pigs and chickens all need, around 14% protein, I'm supplementing with some brewer's grain that we're getting from Aspen Brewery. So I feed about 600 to 800 pounds of brewer's grain a week. So that's the other half of the equation.
Was that good or what? Thank you again for attending our twice monthly CEED NTP Huddle or webinar that we do right here from our Northern Colorado headquarters. Please join us again in normally 2 weeks, but it's always on the 1st and the 3rd Wednesdays of the month at 1 o'clock Mountain Time. You can listen to it, you can come and see us live, or if you register and you're not able to attend, you can get the replay. But make sure to register, look for another email from us, or look on our websites, and you'll get the information, and we'll see you again in just about 2 weeks.